And no wonder there's so much of this. Come on. The amount of time that the courts in the United States take are not what is causing the terror. It was a disgraceful performance in an administration that has been full of them, perhaps a new low.
Professor Turley, the president also said today that America needs far greater punishment for terrorists. Is it clear to you what that means and what exactly far greater punishment would look like? I mean, the Boston Marathon bomber, for example, is on death row.
Right. I'm not too sure what it means, quite frankly. I've been lead counsel in terrorism cases in the United States. I refuse to take enemy combatant cases in Gitmo because of the due process limitations. I don't know what the president was referring to. The penalties in terrorism cases are, as you've noted, extreme. And also this idea it takes too long. You know, this man will never see a free day for the rest of his life. While these cases can stay in the courts a long time, these people are in jail. And in this case, conviction is hardly going to be difficult. I mean, he left quite a trail. He seems to be eager to admit his guilt. So I just don't know what the president was thinking of when he wants a faster system. But I think that the danger of these comments is that we can't bend to the threat of people like this. We can't give up our values. That's how you defeat Al-Qaeda, is by remaining true to who you are. And we're defined by due process. And it's expensive and it takes time, but it works. And the punishment is, as you've noted, quite heavy.
I mean, Ambassador, it sort of harkens back to the time the president was speaking to law enforcement officers and talked about, you know, don't be so gentle with them, don't put your hand on their head when you're putting them in the vehicle, which then law enforcement, you know, agencies put out statements and said to their officers, look, this is not how we handle, you know, this is not how we deal with suspects, not people who have even been convicted, but with suspects people. It does seem like it's the kind of thing in a bar. It's one thing to say, oh, you know, it's a joke and it's a laughingstock. It's another thing for the President of the United States to be saying this.
Anderson, it's so true. When our nation is attacked and lives are lost here, we look to the President for leadership to help us heal, to help us respond with strength, but also to defend the Constitution, our founding document, and the virtues that make America great, not to attack them. And, you know, it actually was very similar to what happened with those prior law enforcement comments, because the president also said he might consider sending this gentleman to Guantanamo. Well, now we're hearing reports that, in fact, the man, by the president's own Justice Department, is going to be charged, as he should be, in the U.S. justice system. So you have a repudiation there by the president's own Justice Department. My heavens, the Attorney General was sitting right across from President Trump. He should have stood up and walked out.
Professor Turley, what do you say to those who are watching and say, look, this guy should just go to Guantanamo, you know, put him away forever and never think about him again?
Well, I think that people have to think seriously about the implications of what they're suggesting. First of all, Guantanamo Bay has been a colossal failure. There have been very few trials that have come out of that. It's been a rallying cry for extremists around the world. And in many ways, it really undermines our credibility, both inside and outside the country. But I think that people also have to consider in the administration what this case would mean if the president changes its course and sends him to Guantanamo Bay. You know, the legal status of these trials in Guantanamo Bay has always been somewhat precarious. For an individual like this would be the worst possible case to test those principles. Bad cases can become bad law, and they should think very seriously whether they really want a case of a lawful resident being sent to Guantanamo Bay to be the next case before the Supreme Court. That's not the case I would bet on if I was on their side.
Professor, is the record of trying terrorists in American courts better than the record of trying them through Guantanamo?
Yes, it's much better because they get tried. Most of the people in Guantanamo Bay were not tried. And I can tell you, someone who's been lead on the defense side of these cases, the idea that they are mollycoddled or that they play fast and loose with the system is simply not true. The conviction rate among terrorism cases is one of the highest of any crime in the United States. It's very rare to have people acquitted in terrorism cases. But what they do get is a fair trial. And then when we impose the punishment, we impose it on our terms, not theirs, and they get a fair trial, the type of thing they deny other people.
Yeah. Professor Charlie, appreciate it. Norm Eisen as well, Ambassador. Thank you. Coming up, keep learning more about the radical Islamist suspect in yesterday's attack, including why he specifically picked Halloween and what police found on his phones. The latest on that and his background in Uzbekistan.
With a professor who just happens to be able to hook you up with Russian government Ministry of Foreign Affairs official. Ministry of Foreign Affairs is often a cover position for Russian intel. He then meets a woman who claims she's related to Vladimir Putin. We find out from the Mueller team she's not. Then we see Manafort and Gates representing a Ukrainian pro-Russian presidential candidate. The party is pro-Russia. They are told to put their money for consulting in a Cyprus bank. Who uses Cyprus banks to launder money? The Russian intelligence service. Their fingerprints are all over this.
And finally, I want to just ask you this detail, also again from your sort of perspective. In a little more than 10 years, Manafort, this is from some of the charging documents, has submitted 10 United States passport applications on 10 different occasions, indicative of his travel schedule. He currently has 3 U.S. passports with different numbers. Have you heard of anything like that before?
That's a lot. Now, look, there are people who travel incredibly, fill up the passport book, need new passports, but this many is problematic. The guy travels a lot, but there's way too many passports going on here. And again, I think he got a primer on how the Russians can influence a campaign when he represented the Ukrainian candidate, and he saw what Russia could do to manipulate a campaign, and he liked it.
That's an interesting idea. Frank Figliuzzi, thank you for that. I appreciate it. Tonight, new reporting, the President of the United States is beginning to blame his own son-in-law for the predicament he finds himself in. That story coming up.
What exactly did the Podesta group do with all the money they got from Paul Manafort, who got it from the Ukrainians? Well, according to the federal indictment, Tony Podesta, quote, lobbied multiple members of Congress and their staffs about Ukraine sanctions, the validity of Ukraine elections, and the propriety of Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych imprisoning his presidential rival, end quote. Now, did you catch the key phrase in there? It was members of Congress. The Ukrainians were not paying to influence a presidential campaign. They were paying to sway the Congress, the body that makes this country's laws. According to a confidential source we talked to, the Podesta group consistently arranged meetings between American lawmakers and pro-Russian agents. Our source says Podesta set up several meetings between pro-Russian Ukrainians and then Senate Foreign Relations Committee Chairman Bob Menendez of New Jersey. Probably not too surprising, Menendez, you'll recall, is currently on trial for bribery. We reached out to his office this afternoon for comment and got this from Tricia Enright, his communications director, quote, when Tucker Carlson acts like a real journalist and not a puppet for the alt-right conspiracy theorists, we will be happy to work with him. Menendez probably has nothing to lose at this point. But all of it does raise an interesting question. Which other lawmakers in Washington were meeting with and perhaps doing the bidding of agents of a rival hostile government? Well, the frustrating, indeed the infuriating answer is, we don't know. Lobbyists are required by law to disclose which foreign governments they're working for. Members of Congress have exempted themselves from that disclosure requirement. They can meet with all the foreign agents they want. They can change U.S. law and policy based on those meetings, and they never have to reveal any of it to the public. And that's exactly what they do. It happens every single day here, and it's all in secret. Other governments influence American policy all the time in big ways and small, and you don't have the right to know about any of it. Looking for a foreign influence scandal? We've got one for you, and it's extensive. Take the Podesta Group. According to federal documents, the Podesta Group didn't just work for the Ukrainians. They also lobbied on behalf of interests in Azerbaijan, Iraq, South Sudan, Myanmar, Somalia, Kosovo, Thailand, India, Moldova, the Communist government of Vietnam, among others. According to our sources from inside the company, they were also unofficially lobbying for the Sultan of Brunei, an Islamic autocrat accused of numerous human rights abuses. In each case, presumably, the Podesta Group made the case for those countries in front of American members of Congress and their staffs. Which members did they talk to? What did they get in return? We don't know. Because as we said, Congress won't tell us. They don't have to. They make the laws. We do know the scale of foreign lobbying in Washington is breathtaking. In 2013, that's the last year for which we have numbers, the top 10 highest spending countries spent about $70 million lobbying DC, and that's just the spending that was actually made public. Around the world, foreign interests know the fastest way to get things done in Washington is to pay for it, and boy, do they pay for it. Just counting Russia and other post-Soviet states, at least 440 clients have high representation here in Washington, lobbyists. Of course, that figure does not include entities that fail to register, and some of the most powerful ones don't and never have registered. Nor do these numbers include the de facto lobbying that takes place via informal networks. That might be the most common. It's certainly the most insidious kind of lobbying there is. For example, in 2014, the Clinton Foundation received more than $10 million from Ukrainian sources. Is there anyone who's going to claim with a straight face there was no political intent behind that money? The Ukrainians are suddenly committed to fighting cholera and childhood obesity? Spare us. There's a lot more to the story, more than we realize, but here's the bottom line. Hostile nations are, in fact, attacking our democracy. They're doing it with the help of our own Congress. It is time for members of Congress to come clean and tell us exactly what's going on. So you're on the Foreign Affairs Committee.
Yes.
And we wanted to know what foreign lobbyists' interests you had met with. So we called over to your office, and this is the response that we got. I'm quoting. I'm sure he's met with folks who registered under FARA, as well as ambassadors, government officials, and heads of state, but they had no details. Why shouldn't citizens be able to know who a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee is meeting with from a foreign country?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. I mean, we have a number of meetings as a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee. Sometimes it's heads of state, sometimes it's an ambassador, obviously are lobbying for the country, but those are government officials. There are occasions in which people who are hired as lobbyists advocate for a particular country. They have to disclose that. Someone wouldn't get an appointment if they just said, I want to talk to you about Uzbekistan or Pakistan.
Right.
So they have to disclose that, and they're required, of course, under law to register, to disclose what they're paid, et cetera, under FARA. So I think that's really important.
But I guess it would make 2 points. One, many of them don't register, as you know.
Well, they should, and anyone who, and if they don't, I mean, I actually have a piece of legislation, it's a bipartisan bill with Matt Gaetz to actually strengthen the Foreign Registration Act to allow for, more tools to do investigations. So I think we have to make sure that law is strong. People should comply with it. It provides important information so people know who lobbyists are working for, how much they're getting paid, et cetera, and I think that's important.
Yeah, I mean, that was the question is, why is it taking this long? And there are huge lobbyists who don't register at all under FARA, as you know, and it's pretty outrageous in my view.
I agree.
But the real question
is the law, and everyone should follow it.
But everyone knows that it's not followed here, and everyone's always done that. It's true, and you know it.
I mean, I wouldn't.
But why isn't Congress you subject to the same disclosure? I don't understand
what I'm saying is, I think we should absolutely insist that people comply with the law. When Congress passed that law, it makes sense. It's important for when someone is advocating on behalf of a foreign government.
I get it. Then we agree.
Right.
And I hope that you.
And I hope you're wrong that there are lots of people that are breaking the law. But if they are breaking the law,
the Podesta
they should be held accountable.
We know the Podesta group didn't register in its representation of the Iranians.
That law
it says so
applies to everyone who lobbies,
but it doesn't apply to you, and that's what I don't understand.
No, because members of Congress don't lobby or advocate on behalf of foreign governments.
You're the reason they're spending this money.
No, that's right. And anyone who lobbies a member of Congress is required to disclose that they're working.
Why shouldn't you disclose it? Why shouldn't I be able to call your office and get a straight answer?
Well, no. I mean, you can call my office and say, who did I meet with in the last 8 years?
Why not disclose it? I mean, because what they're doing is foreign governments are spending money to influence
Tucker, no one's making a secret of it. What I'm saying to you
is... that's not true.
No, that's not true. No one keeps a record of it because people come into your office.
Lobbyists have to keep records.
That's right.
Why shouldn't you have to keep a record?
No, I don't have any objection to that. I mean, we don't do it as a matter of practice to keep a record of everything.
Don't want to, of course, you don't want to be held accountable.
No, it's not a question of I'm happy to be held accountable. I'm a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee. People come to meet with me who are heads of state, that are ambassadors, that people who are advocating on behalf of a foreign government. I meet with them. They make their case.
But why shouldn't I be allowed to know that?
No, absolutely. I have no objection to you knowing that. But don't say that anyone's trying to keep any secret.
Of course you are, or else you would mandate it.
No,
of course.
No, it's not mandated.
I know it's not, and that's why most people don't admit who they meet with.
No, I think most members of the Foreign Affairs
Committee admit that
they meet.
Then why not it's really simple. Pass a law, just pass a law tomorrow, and you should advocate for it and say, members of Congress who meet with foreign agents ought to keep a list, and they ought to reveal that list to the public.
That's a terrific idea.
Good.
I think that's a terrific idea.
Did you ever meet with anyone from the Podesta group?
I don't think I've ever met Mr. Podesta.
No, from the group.
Yeah, I'm sure they're
on behalf of foreign clients. Yeah.
I don't know that I've met with anyone who lobbied on behalf of a foreign government.
Why would they come to see you?
Well, they have other clients that are not foreign government.
So you never met with a foreign client represented by the Podesta group?
Not that I remember.
I wish we had a register so we could check this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't keep track of everyone I met with in 8 years.
Maybe we'll get one. Congressman, thank you for coming on.
My pleasure.
Representing such a great state.
Thanks.
Well, he's the most famous lobbyist in the history of Washington lobby.
And you know, and his actual behavior. I mean, he always is saying we're cooperating, we're confident that we will found innocent. Is that the case? I mean, is he kind of the fulcrum for the White House's response?
Sort of, but it's also a matter of the fact that the president and the White House do not actually have a choice at this point for them to cooperate. Even Bannon himself has not been urging the president to order the sacking of Robert Mueller because they're aware of the political firestorm and the potential political suicide that would ensue if they did that. Having said that, Bannon is one of the president's closest advisors, even though Steve Bannon himself does not work within Trump's West Wing anymore, and he is essentially being a devil on Trump's shoulder on this.
Yeah, that sounds like familiar. What do you think about this Kushner? I mean, anytime I see anyone kneecapping Kushner or Ivanka, or back in the day, people kneecapping Bannon, I was always trying to read the tea leaves of which faction of the West Wing was going after who. Mm-hmm. What are we to make of this idea that he's turned against Kushner?
Well, I think the most important thing to remember about Donald Trump is it's never his fault, right? He never will take responsibility for any decision, right? So in the wake of pushing out Steve Bannon, in the wake of pushing out Reince Priebus, Sean Spicer, and all of the other advisors who were sort of part of that original West Wing team, the only one there who is part of that core group now is Jared Kushner. And so Donald Trump looks out, as my reporting indicates, he says, how did I get into this mess? And what he sees is that Jared Kushner was by his side at every critical moment that led to the appointment of the special prosecutor. So Donald Trump has been telling people, as I understand in this phone call I reported on with Steve Bannon, that he said, listen, Jared Kushner is part of the reason I'm in this mess because he, encouraged me. He was part of the decision to fire Jim Comey. He was part of the decision to fire Mike Flynn. These were the trigger points that led us to the special counsel.
Sven, I want to read a quote for you from Gabe's reporting and tell me if that squares with things you hear from people in the White House. This is Nunberg, who of course is a Trump advisor on the outside. Jared is the worst political advisor in the White House in modern history. I'm only saying publicly what everyone says behind the scenes at Fox News and conservative media and the Senate and the Congress. Do you hear that?
Well, within the White House, Jared Kushner certainly has a number of people, actually both within and without the White House, who are in Trump's inner political circle, who greatly resent him. Having said that, the president is lashing out at his son-in-law and senior advisor, Jared Kushner, but he is also lashing out at a lot of people within his inner circle. This is not exclusive
that's
to Mr. Kushner, and relate to what you were saying earlier, where the president laughably told the New York Times that, oh, I actually think this is fun. I'm not actually mad. That is patently false. Anyone with any understanding of this president can tell you that. And when the president gets madder and the more Russia is in the news cycle, he hate tweets more and yells at the TV a lot more. And nowadays there's a lot of yelling at the TV and a lot of live tweeting of Fox News.
Yeah, as I said before, actually I'm not mad is not a statement that's ever been true. Gabe Sherman and Aswan Sue saying thanks.
Thank you.
Still to come, why the president may be personally inclined to grant Paul Manafort.
Former advisor who's now cooperating with authorities. So the question is the president agonizing over these developments, or is he cool as a cucumber? Kind of depends on who you're talking to. Maggie Haberman just spoke with the president himself today. He downplayed any concern over the developments, but that is at odds with what Jeff Zeleny has been hearing. He joins me now. Maggie is joining us on the phone. So Jeff, what's the latest you're learning about the impact the special counsel is having on the president as he prepares to go to Asia?
Well, Anderson, good evening. There's no question that the entire Russia investigation has consumed this White House and, in fact, much of Washington for the last several days. And some aides are concerned that it's interrupted the president's briefing time, his time to learn exactly what needs to happen on this voyage he's about to go on Friday. But the big question here tonight is if it's a welcome diversion going to Asia for this time, or if his preoccupation with Russia is a dangerous distraction while he's there. Now, there's no question this is a high-stakes a foreign adventure he's going on. Even if this was not happening, the rising threat of a nuclear Pyongyang would be certainly a challenge for him. But the concern from some aides we're talking to is that some of these briefings have been interrupted, some have been cut short. In fact, he spent several hours earlier this week, in fact, all morning until early afternoon in the residence of the White House following bit by bit, blow by blow of this Russia investigation. So the question here is he fully briefed on this? But Anderson, many aides say that they're actually looking forward to changing the subject, and they believe this trip will actually force him to focus on something. It will take away his telephone, his television watching habits, and he'll focus on the matter at hand. In fact, we've seen in other previous foreign trips, he's actually done quite well.
So Maggie, you spoke to the president by phone today. What did he tell you, and how did he sound?
Well, his voice was very upbeat. He clearly wanted to communicate a message, Anderson, that, despite what we have read in some places, that, he's not, quote unquote, fuming, he's not railing about this. And I think there's an important distinction to be made. I think that his television viewing habits, which we know about and which annoy him enormously, that we say what they are, but they are what they are. I think that is separate and distinct from whether his mood is being governed by them. I do think that he is extremely focused on this. What has been described to me by aides, however, and this has been the case for a while, is, he will vent and blow off steam, and then he will move on. And there has been a lot of that around this. He has been calmer than some folks had anticipated, in part because they knew an indictment of Paul Manafort was imminent at some point. They didn't know precisely when. They didn't know necessarily that it would include Rick Gates, Manafort's deputy, although that seemed likely. George Papadopoulos, the foreign policy hand who pleaded guilty, that one caught some people by surprise. The fact that Sam Clovis, another former advisor to the president, who is currently up for an appointment that's awaiting Senate confirmation, the fact that he went to speak to Robert Mueller also caught people by surprise. But that, I think, is different than sort of a sense of constant disarray, which is what I have had a lot of pushback from, not just from the president, but by some of his top advisors.
Megan, there was reporting, I think it was on Monday, that the president had spent the morning watching television, especially, and that briefings had to be pushed back, that he didn't go down to work until like 12:30. Did you get the sense that he was talking to you with the express purpose of rebutting the reporting, like Jeff, that he's been seething with anger?
I think that is entirely what he was hoping to do. I think that he is frustrated by seeing those reports. I think that whether he realizes how people take his venting moments or not is a different question. He clearly does not want that narrative to be out there, and as you know very well, he likes to try to take control of a narrative. I think he was hoping to dispel the impression of sort of, White House disarray.
And Jeff, in terms of logistics for this Asia trip, I mean, everything from time difference to the food the president's eating, all that is being viewed against the backdrop of trying to keep him happy on message and focused.
Sure, and again, separate of this Russia investigation, for a new president, only 9 months in office, this is a challenge for anyone. Particularly, look where he's going. He's going to Asia, to 5 countries. He's going as close as he's ever come to North Korea. Of course, so every word he says will be, studied and parsed, and that is why this is a challenging thing. And we heard a lot of details reporting this story tonight. Of course, his advisors are trying to keep him comfortable. It's one of the reasons he's stopping in Honolulu on the way out to Tokyo. He's going to try and get adjusted to a time zones. Most presidents do this, but he is going to be given a food that's familiar to him. Again, most presidents have this, but it's so interesting, Anderson, talking to aides. They want to make sure he's upbeat and happy. But again, on the earlier trips he's taken earlier this year, he in fact has enjoyed being in the company of world leaders here. So a lot of his advisors actually think this is a welcome opportunity to actually change the subject and actually sort of be a diversion here. Again, the question is how much of this will be a distraction for him, because of course he'll still get news updates, and there are some surprises still to come in this investigation here. And of course he's following those bit by bit.
Yeah, Jeff Zeleny, Maggie Haberman, appreciate it. Thank you. Up next, more on the Russia probe and exactly the kind of things that might be weighing on the president. New details revealed about former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort's lavish lifestyle, including multiple passports, fake names, dozens of bank accounts. Fascinating stuff ahead.
We're on to you, diabetes.